So what to do with the tails? I tend to wrap it around the very last kind of cut and pull it tight, just like that. Okay. And I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. I wouldn't trim them because sometimes what can happen is the warp threads will come undone. So I just loop them around the last one. And then I'm going to leave them kind of dangling straight down here so that eventually I can they'll become part of the last warp thread. So now I'm ready to add my first piece of weft. So I've taken my wool, I've folded it in half, and I have two tails. Okay, there's the two tails on one end, and there's the center of my weft there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap one side underneath the last warp, and then I'm going to just kind of, this is how I learned. I dangle them down, and I'm going to take the piece of wool that's at the back side, it's going to cross over the warp thread, it's going to go around the corner, and it's going to go underneath. Okay, then once it goes underneath, I'll pull it down. I'm going to look at my two weft threads that are dangling down. I always put them in the dangling down position so I can kind of get a sense of which is the front and which is the back. So now my back one, right there, I'm going to pick it up and it's going to go over the warp thread I just went underneath. So it's around the corner, it's going to go over that one and it's going to go under the next one. I'm going to pull it through. Okay, and you're going to try not to pull too tight. So then again, this is how I teach kids. I dangle them down. Now which is the front and which is the back. So I'm going to pick up my back weft thread and then I'm going to go over top of the one I'm going to go over top of the one I just went underneath. And so I'm going over that one and I'm going to go under the next. And this is called twining. Okay, so I'm going to pull it through and okay, so now I can look at it again and I can see which is my front weft thread and which is my back. So I'm going to pick up my back. I'm going to go over top of the one I just went under. And then I'm going to go under the next one. The instructions sound more complicated than it really is. After you do this a while, you get a real feel for it. Okay, so again, I'm going to pick up my back weft thread. I'm going to go over top of the one I just went under, and then I'm going to go under the next one. It just takes a little bit of practice. After you've done it a couple of times, again, it's like muscle memory. So I'm picking up my back, I'm going over the one I just went under, I'm lifting up the next warp thread and pulling it underneath. Okay, and again, you don't want to pull too tight. You want your weaving to be fairly loose. And you want to make sure that your weft threads, when kids are starting out, you want to make sure their wefts aren't too long or they get tangled and then frustration happens. So we're getting close to the end of the front side, and this is where it gets a little tricky. So again, I'm going to look and see which is my back weft thread. I'm going to pick it up. It's going to go over top and then underneath the next one. Now this is what I tell the kids. I call this going around the corner. So same technique. I'm going to pick up. So there's my last warp thread. I'm going to pick up the one that's behind. I'm going to go around the corner. Okay. And then it's going to go under the first warp thread on this side. Okay. And now if I lay them and let them hang again, I can see which is my back one and which is my front. So I'm picking up my back one. It's going to go over top of the first warp thread because that's the one I just went under. and then it's going to go underneath the next one, and you're just going to continue this all the way around. Okay, so I'm gonna, if I get confused or if I take a break, I just always kind of hold up my weaving and dangle it so I can see which is the front weft thread and which is the back. That's the way I kind of figure it out. And you just keep on going. Okay, so I'm getting close to the other side, and so you get to see how you go around the corner again, but it's basically the same technique. The back thread is going to go over the one you just went under, and then under the next warp thread. Once you do this often enough, and you'll find you get really, really fast. It just, there's a rhythm to it. So, and this is more difficult right now because I'm trying to videotape it and talk at the same time, so it's always a little trickier. But here I am. I'm on my last warp thread on this side, so I'm going to go under that one. Okay, and then I'm going to see, there's my back thread. My back thread is going to go around that corner, and it's going to go under the first warp thread on this side. It'd be much easier if I had a better surface to work on here. Okay, so now I've turned the corner. Now I'm going to pick up my back warp weft thread. It's going to go over top of the first warp thread there and underneath the second. And that's how you go around the corner. I'll have more little videos here to show you how to get around that corner. That's probably the hardest thing for kids to get at first. So when I show kids this, I talk it through. So I talk aloud and say, okay, which one is my back? Okay, my back. You know, and that it's a good technique for kids to kind of learn how to do it, and they can see pretty fast. You can see kind of the weave forming, whether they've made a mistake or not. Sometimes what will happen is they will go under two, or they'll miss one, and you can see the error pretty fast. You'll notice too that I'm scrunching the weft threads once I've done a few down a little bit, and this just makes sure that your weaving is tight. Okay, you can use a fork, or you can use one of those plastic combs too if you want. You don't want a lot of gaps in your weft rows. You want it to be fairly tight.